So are you going to Loughborough University later this year but you still haven't decided where you want to live? Well, you've come to the right place. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This channel is all about preparing young people for adult life whilst being a boss in the process. So you're going to be starting at Loughborough University later this year, but you still haven't decided where you're going to live. Well, not to worry. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on every single Loughborough University accommodation, as well as some external, independent, off-campus accommodations that are also very popular. But before we get into the video, if you could hit that like button, it literally takes 2 seconds. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below if you enjoyed this video. That would be great. So we're gonna look at catered, then self-catered, and then off-campus independent accommodation. But if you're still deciding whether you want to go to Loughborough University or not, then watch my review on it. But let's start with catered accommodations. So in terms of catered accommodations, there are 7 of them that Loughborough offers, and we're gonna be starting with Cayley, Rutherford, Royce and Faraday. All of them are in the same part of campus, which is called the Village, and they're all quite similar. But down below there is a link to each accommodation that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So if you want to have a more detailed look at what they have to offer and what room options you have, then click on the links below. Now Cayley was where I stayed in my first year at university. It's a good accommodation if you want to meet new people. Also, the hall committees for Cayley and the other 3 are very active, so there will always be something going on if you want to get involved. And one other point about these accommodations is that they're quite close to everywhere in campus, so you won't really have to walk that long if you want to get to places. Now let's look at David Collett, or DC. So I don't know too much about David Collett, but one thing that I do know is that every single engineering person seems to live there. And the reason for this is because it's quite close to the engineering side of campus. So if you study engineering, then this is an accommodation that you should definitely consider, especially if you want to have the catered life. Okay, cool. So Elvin Richards. So this is where the rich kids go apparently. It's because every single room in this accommodation is an ensuite room and also catered, but you're only catered Monday to Friday, I believe. So if you want to be ensuite and catered, then this is probably one of your best options. I would say that it is quite noisy at night. I remember walking through those accommodation blocks at night and it is very noisy sometimes. So if you like going partying and all of that, then that is probably the place for you. But if you're more of a quiet person, then maybe not so much. And finally, for catered options, let's look at Towers. This accommodation feeds its students 7 days a week. So if you're someone who really doesn't like cooking, then this is probably an option that you should consider. I would also say that if you're someone that is not really into modern accommodations, then this is one for you. But I will say though, that the view that some of these rooms have of Loughborough is very nice. So one of my friends actually lived in Towers and the view that they had of Loughborough was pretty cool. Like you could see like miles and miles away. So if you're into all of this stuff, then this is probably an accommodation you should consider. And one final point about the catered options, all of them will be on campus and a decent distance from every single lecture hall that there is. So keep that in mind when you're deciding whether you want to go self-catered or catered for your first year. Okay, cool. So now we've covered all of the catered options. So now let's look at what the self-catered accommodations have to offer. But like I said earlier, if you want to look at these accommodations in more detail, then click on the links in the description. Okay, cool. So let's start off with Butler Court. So I've been to a few of their rooms and I know that Butler Court offers shared rooms. So if you want to share a room with someone, then you should consider Butler Court. Also, they have a pretty good and large common room. So if you're someone who wants to have good events and stuff, then check out Butler Court's common room. It's very big. And finally, Butler Court, as well as Towers actually, they're both very close to the exam center. So if you're someone who knows that you might wake up late for an exam, then maybe consider Butler Court or Towers because they're very close to where you're going to sit your exams. Okay, cool. So now let's talk about Faulkner Eggington or Falk-Egg. I believe that this is still the cheapest option for accommodation that Loughborough University offers. And what I've got to say about it is that this accommodation kind of has a community feel to it, at least the times that I visited it, because it has this road that goes through it and then there's like 2 common rooms, or there's one common room and then another games room or something like that. So if you're someone into the community spirit, then maybe check out Falk-Egg. Okay, cool, so let's talk about Telford now. Telford is quite similar to Falk-Egg in that it is also quite cheap, but Telford is right in the village, so it's quite close to Cayley, Rutherford, Royce, Faraday. It's close to all of those accommodations. So if you're someone who wants to be close to everything, then Telford is an accommodation that you should definitely consider. Okay, cool, so now let me share my thoughts on Hazelrig Rutland. I think I've been in one of their rooms. I don't actually remember too well, but the room that I was in that I do remember, and I think it was Hazelrig, it was decent, but that's as much as I know, to be honest. So if you're someone looking into Hazelrig Rutland, then I would say check the link down below. It's not one of the accommodations that I hear many students talking about often, to be honest, at least in my own circles. So check that one out if you have your eye on it. Okay, cool, so now let's talk about Robert Bakewell. I would say that this is the engineering self-catered option because it is also quite close to the engineering side of campus. So if you're an engineering student, then I would say to definitely check this one out, especially if you want to cook your own food and all of that. But I don't actually know what the rooms look like inside, so once again check the links down below to make sure that Robert Bakewell has what you need. Okay, cool, so let me talk about Claudia Parsons now. So this is very close to Cayley and it is very new as well. It looks very nice. If you're someone who wants the most modern accommodation on campus, then Claudia Parsons is definitely your option. But one quick thing that I will say about Claudia Parsons and every single village accommodation really is that there are lots of people who go out. So if you're someone that doesn't really go out that much, then one downside about living in the village is that you're gonna have a lot of people in that area going out to the students' union. Okay, cool, so the final three self-catered options are all off-campus accommodations. So those are Harry French, William Morris and the Holt. So starting off with Harry French, one good thing about Harry French is the actual location. So it's on a road that is halfway between campus and the town. So if you need to go to town to get groceries and all of that kind of stuff, then you won't have to walk too much. And if you want to go to campus, you also won't have to walk too much as well. So basically it's in a pretty nice spot. William Morris now is much closer to campus, so you would have to walk quite a distance to get to town. But William Morris is quite close to the Students' Union. I think it's literally on the other side of the road. So if you need to get to the Students' Union for whatever reason, then William Morris is the closest accommodation to it. And finally, the Holt, I would say that that is a very pretty accommodation. It's got this old style vibe to it. So if you like that kind of stuff, then it's definitely for you. And I would also say that the Holt, at least from my own experience, is a lot quieter than the other accommodations that I've been to. But one thing about the Holt is the actual location of it. So it's quite far from any shops and anything like that. It's a decent distance from campus, but it's not as close as any of the other accommodations. I would even go as far to say that the Holt is the furthest accommodation from the actual campus, and it's also the furthest accommodation from town. But the rooms are very nice at the Holt, and from my own experience, it is a very peaceful accommodation. So if that's the kind of thing that you like, then definitely consider it. I think there are even some deers that run around in the greenery of the Holt. So if you like that kind of peaceful vibe, then the Holt is definitely for you. Okay, cool. So now let me talk a little bit about some off-campus accommodations, specifically Waterways, Foundry 1 and Foundry 2. So one thing that I know about Waterways is that it is literally in town. So the fact that Waterways is in town also makes it feel like it is a bit urban. So if you like an urban accommodation, this kind of like city life feel to your accommodation, then Waterways is definitely one that you should consider. Also, one thing about Waterways is that it's quite some distance from campus. So if you're someone who doesn't like walking so much to get to lectures and stuff, then Waterways probably isn't the place for you. All right, cool. So Foundry 1 and Foundry 2, they're literally on opposite sides of the road. Their location in town is very good, but the walk to campus is a little bit lengthy. But if you don't mind that too much, or if you're gonna get a bike, then this shouldn't really be an issue. In terms of the actual rooms, from what I've seen, they are very nice. One thing that I have heard, however, is that Foundry 2 is newer than Foundry 1. So I would say have a look at both and see how each of them might meet your needs, and then make your decision based on that. So yeah, those are just some quick thoughts on accommodation at Loughborough. But what you should do next is watch my video on top tips for first year students. And I'll see you guys next time for another video.